All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. A lot to do today as well. Baruch Hashem. So we'll say begin by thanking our Talmud Torah sponsors. To thank Shmuley and Libadinovitz for dedicating all the shiurim and trashos this month in memory of Shmuley's father, Harav Peretz Avram Ben Rav Binyamin Moshe Zichron Livrach. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama have an aliyah and the family Einacham. Rabbi, so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Kesuvos Daf Vav. Incredible. Kesuvos Daf Vav. And we are picking up on Hey Amud Beis 5b. We have a lot to do today. We're picking up with the Bailahu, which is pretty much like right in the middle of the daf. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, about 13, 14 lines down from the top. Ibailahu. Mo little b'tchil b'Shabbos. So the Gemara says as follows. What's the halacha concerning Bia Rishona on Shabbos? First act of relations on Shabbos. I will say, the truth is we've already spoken about this a little bit. We've had braisos that speak about, again, how Bia Rishona ideally should not occur on Shabbos. But now we're going to focus a little bit more on trying to understand what's the issue. See, here we go. Say, Bailuhum, Ma Libo B'Tchil B'Shabbos. So we'll say, what's the shaila? So remember, again, going back to yesterday's daf, it seemed like the issue ultimately, again, of Bia Rishona on Shabbos was one of Chabura, one of causing an injury. Remember, again, as we spoke about, halacha l'maisa, if you cause an injury that draws blood, that is the malacha of shchita. Shchita is one of the 39 malachas. So it appeared, based on what we saw, that halacha l'maisa, if one goes ahead and engages in the Bia Rishona on Shabbos, that is the malacha of shchita. So the Gemara says, let's analyze. So ma'al liva b'tzil Shabbos. Dam, mifkat pakit, o chaburi michbar. So we'll say, we're going to get now into a very interesting chakira. So here's what we're assuming. Okay, we're assuming that with bia of a basula, there's basulim. There's a hymen that's intact. When there's bia rishona, there's going to be blood as a result of that first act of relations. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara is asking over here, what's the nature of drawing that blood? Do we say dam mifkat pakit? Now, boss, if you look at Rashi, mifkat pakit kimo pikadon kanos va'omi ve'eno nivla b'dofne haracham lios yitziaso aidi chabura ela shepas shapesach no b'fana poslo. So we'll say, do we look at the blood of the basulim as being absorbed in the body, and therefore, again, when the basulim are broken and the woman bleeds, that you're extracting blood from the body, which is a problem of causing a chabur, a problem of causing a wound, and problem ultimately of shchita on Shabbos? Is that what it means? So we'll say, right, does it mean, I'm sorry, let me read again. It's opposite. Mifkat pakid or chaburi, let me work backwards. Oh, chaburi michbar. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's work backwards. Chaburi michbar means that we assume the blood is absorbed in the body. And therefore, again, when the basulim are broken, the husband is causing the wife to bleed, extracting blood from her body. Both say that is the malacha of shchita. That's if you look at Rashi. Rashi is chaburi michbar, tam basulim yosei edi chabura hubasha dofim mispark michabra. Or do we say mifkat pakid? Both say mifkat pakid means the blood of the basulim is not absorbed in the body. Where is it absorbed? In the basulim. But the basulim is really outside of the body, so to speak. In other words, it's not internal, it's external. And therefore, when you draw that blood, halacha l'maisa, you're not causing a chabura. So we'll say here, this is the fundamental shaila. Do we say dam mifkat pakid is absorbed externally on the body in the basulim, and therefore, ultimately, again, when the woman bleeds, that's not a malacha? Or do we say chaburi michbar? No, the blood of the basulim is absorbed in the body, and therefore, bia rishona, which causes bleeding, halacha l'maisa is going to be a malacha on Shabbos. So now we're going to go further in the Chakira. And if you say that indeed the blood is, most of mifkat pakid means like collected externally. If you say that the blood is collected externally outside of the body, so do we say the dam hu tzarach v'shari? So we say, look, at the end of the day, what does the husband need from the bia rishona? It's interesting. What does he need from the bia rishona? He needs the dam. He needs the blood. Because what does the blood show? That she's a basula. O dilma, or the other possibility is no, lepesach utzarich. Did I both say what's the goal of the bia rishona? The goal of the bia rishona is to create a pesach, is to create an opening so that future bia could occur. Now, both say, now 1 second. What's the problem with Pesach? The problem with Pesach, I will say, if we take a look at Rashi, this is fascinating. Maybe the act of creating an opening on Shabbos is binyan, is bona. Now, I will say the notion that binyan, that building, could apply to a person is actually quite interesting. This is not the only example of this. We know that halacha l'maisa, you're not allowed to braid hair on Shabbos. Not allowed to make a braid. I don't have this problem. But l'maisa, again, right, it's very shayach for women. You're not allowed to, a woman's not allowed to braid her hair on Shabbos. The act of making a braid is in and of itself an act of bona. It's an act of building. So you see that the concept of bona applies to a person as well. So I will say, so watch this. So there's multiple stages to this. So here's what I know. I know that Bia Rishona shouldn't occur on Shabbos. So why not? Why not? Or at least what we learned yesterday. Here the Gemara is asking as a question. In yesterday's daf, we saw it much more as a definitive statement. Ideally, Bia Rishona shouldn't occur on Shabbos. Here the Gemara is asking as a question. Can Bia Rishona occur on Shabbos? So part one to the answer is, well, what's the nature of dam besulim? What's the nature of besula blood? Is it mifkat pakid, absorbed and collected outside of the body, in which case it's not a problem to go ahead and break the besulim on Shabbos, or chaburi michbar, or maybe it's absorbed in the body. And it's absorbed in the body, then to extract it out of the body, ultimately again will be a malacha. That's issue number one. Issue number two is even if you say mifkat pakid, that is collected and detached from the body. Therefore, it's not a problem of creating a chabura, not a problem of creating an injury or of shchita on Shabbos. Well, 1 second, what's the intention? Is the intention for the blood? In which case, again, that's fine. Or is the intention to make an opening? In which case, if the intention is to make an opening, we have a problem of bona, of building on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, and I will say, if you say no, the husband's intention from the Bia Rishon is that he wants the blood. Or it sounds strange, but in other words, what's important to him is that the blood shows that ultimately, again, she's a basula. Upesach memela kasi, and ultimately, again, the opening that's created, that's a secondary result. Oh, halacha kureb shimon, davar shenem miskavin oter, or halacha Rabbi Yehuda davar shenem miskavin aser. So I will say, now here's what I have. Assuming that blood is mifkat pakid. It's collected and detached from the body, right? And assuming number two, my kavana is not to create an opening, the kavana is ultimately for the blood. I will say, here's the problem. Even though my kavana is for the blood, what's de facto happening? Creation of an opening. That's called in halacha davar shenem miskavin. Doing something on Shabbos that kind of results in a malacha, but it's not my kavanah to do the malacha. Well, how do we paskin by a davar shenem miskavin? Do we pass like Rabbi Shimon, who says a davar shenem miskavin, if you perform an unintended malacha, ultimately it's mutter, or halacha Rabbi Yehuda? Or is the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds davar shenem miskavin is asar? That's the next shayla. I will say, if you want to say the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, that ultimately a davar shenem miskavin is aser, that an unintended consequence is still going to be aser, in which case Bia Rishona should be aser, because even if your intention is for the blood, lemaisa, again, you're still creating an opening. So do we say mekalkil hu eitzel hapasach, or metakin hu eitzel hapasach? Do we say the creation of the opening is something constructive or something destructive? Now I was saying, what's the pshat? How could it be something destructive? If you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, it's the second Y line in Rashi. Because we'll say even Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that you are chayiv, or that it's asr, davar shenem miskavin is asr, ultimately again will agree in a case of mekalkel, will agree in a case of where what you're doing is destructive, that it is mutter. So we'll say, here's the shayla. Is this considered to be a constructive or destructive act? Now we'll say, watch this, Rashi says, V'yeshlisha al pesach zu im tikunhu etzla, o kilkulu etzla, shabasula chashuva min haba'ula. So we'll say, is the creation of an opening something constructive or destructive? Now, constructive, I understand. Destructive, because we'll say, technically speaking, a basula is more chashav than a ba'ula. Now, what does that mean? let's say if you look at it from a ksuva perspective, right? So a besula has a higher ksuva than ultimately a bu'ula. Okay, so we'll say these are all the studim of the question. Ikeda Amir, we'll say an alternate version of this. Vimtim Slomar Dam Chaburi Michbar. So we'll say now this is the alternate version. The alternate version is if you say that the blood is absorbed in the body, and therefore what the Bia Rishona, the first act of Bia, which ultimately ruptures the Basulim, that creates a Chabura. That creates a wound. That's an injury. And therefore, again, I will say now we have a problem of a malacha. If you say that's the case, Ledam Hud Sarach V'Aser, do we say that he needs the dam, and therefore it's Aser? Ultima Lahanos Atzmo Hud Sarach V'Shari. I don't know, I will say, why is the man engaging in the act of Bia? Why is he engaging in the act of Bia? For his own pleasure. For pleasure purposes. So I will say, so because it's pleasure purposes, again, ultimately he has no kavanah for any of the, in other words, he has kavanah for his hana, but he doesn't have kavanah for these other issues. So maybe you'll say he's engaging in the bia for his own pleasure, and the blood is kind of just an incidental result. 1 second. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Shimon. Then I will say we're back to Davar Shein Miskavin. Do we hold that a Davar Shein Miskavin, an unintended malacha, is mutter like Rabbi Shimon, or us like Rabbi Yehuda? Vim tim salomar halacha Rabbi Yehuda. And if you hold halachas like Rabbi Yehuda, then a Davar Shein Miskavin is aser mekalkel bechabura or matakin bechabura. Is the quote unquote injury? Is the injury something constructive because created an opening, or destructive ultimately because she's no longer a basula? Vim tim salomar mekalkel bechabura. And if you say that ultimately we look at the chabura, the breaking of the basulim, as something destructive, so ultimately again, b'mekalkel halacha Rabbi Yehuda or halacha Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi say ultimately again, who does the halacha follow in the case of mekalkel? Does the halacha follow Rabbi Yehuda or does the halacha follow Rabbi Shimon? Top of vav. So Rabbi say, so now you've seen. So I just want to point out something very interesting. So here are all of the issues that are potentially involved with Bia Rishona on Shabbos. What are all of the issues? So issue number one, which is really the core issue that drives everything else, is how do we look at Dam Besulim? Is Dam Besulim mifkad pakid? Is it absorbed and detached from the body? Or is it chaburi michbar? Is that blood considered to be internal? That's really the issue where everything departs from. Because if it's chaburi michbar, if you're causing an injury, now we have a malacha on our hands. If on the other hand it's mifkat pakid, absorbed and detached from the body, then lamaisa, again, I have much more to work with. So that's issue number one. Issue number two, Rabbi say, is what's the kavana? Is the kavana ultimately for hana, for his own pleasure? Is the kavana to make an opening? And I will say, then ultimately we get into davar she'eino miskavein. Davar she'eino miskavein, unintended consequences, unintended malacha consequences. Do you pass like Rabbi Shimon that it's mutter, Rabbi Yehuda that it's aser? And then I will say, then the third issue is, in general, how do we look at the rupturing of the besulim? Is this mekalkel? Is it considered to be a destructive act or a constructive act? So we'll say, those are all the issues that are swirling around in this halacha. So we'll say, so how do we paskin? It's very interesting. So the Gemara says, Itmar, Bebei Rav Amri, Rav Shari Ushmol Aser. We'll say in the Shiva of Rav, they said that Rav said that it's mutter, Rav said that it's mutter, and Shmuel said that it's aser. Benarda, in Narda, I will say, which was the city of Shmuel. Shmuel was the Marda Asra of Narda. Amri, Rav Aser, Ushmuel Shari. Rav said it's Aser and Shmuel said it's mutter. And the Gemara says there's a very easy way to remember who says what. This is great to say. Very easy way to remember it is in the yeshiva of Rav, everybody wants their Rebbe to be the Mekel. We'll say, isn't this the story of the Jewish people, right? Everyone wants their Rebbe to be the Mekel. So in Rav's yeshiva, they said, Rav was the one who said that Bia Rishona is mutter on Shabbos. And Shmuel said it's us. So Shmuel is the Machmir. In Narda, the city of Shmuel, they said Shmuel was the one who said that Bia Rishona is mutter, and Rav says that it's aser. Good. So I will say, so just when you go through it, so ultimately again, kind of the way you would be matter this is saying what? Dam is mifkad pakid. It's absorbed and detached, right? That's number one. The creation of an opening. We pass like Rabbi Shimon, davar sheno miskavein is mutter. That's pretty much the pathway to saying that bia rishona is mutter. Now, there are other ways you could structure it, but that's these ways. So Gemara says, one second. The Rav Shari, is it passed on Abos? And I remember, in order to say that bia rishona is mutter, you pretty much have to, it sounds like right now, you have to hold like Rabbi Shimon, that davar sheno miskavein is mutter. Right? That's what's going to happen over here. Because even though you're creating an opening, that's not your kavana. So I was saying that's what the Gemara is going to challenge over here. The Rav Shari, look at Rashi, almost right across Rashi, Rav Shari, bitmiya, almo davar sheno miskavein mutter svirale. Does Rav really hold that a davar sheno miskavein is mutter? Does he hold that it was when you perform an act, and the act has an unintended malacha consequence, that is mutter? Is that really how he paskins? Watch this. Hi, misuchria dinezaisa asr la duka biyama tava. We'll say, listen to this. Here's the situation. This misurchia dinezaisa, what does that look at Rashi? Misurchia dinezaisa, stimas nekev gigish, shemotzina shecher derech hanekev, isosmin also bevloi begadim. Listen to this. We'll say, imagine you have a barrel of beer. You have a barrel of beer. The barrel of beer has an opener, has an opening from which you get the beer. What do you need for the opening? A stopper. So we'll say, what do they used to use for a stopper? They would use like a wad of cloth, right? And you would shove that cloth into the opening, and that ultimately, again, is what you use to close up the barrel. Rav says, you cannot put in that stopper on Shabbos. You can't put it in on Shabbos, or I should say, or in Yom Tiv. Right, here it's Yom Tiv. You can't put it on Yom Tiv. Why can't you, say? Why? Because Rabbi say it's an issue of schita. Because every single time you put that stopper into the opening, what by definition is happening? You're squeezing out liquid. Schita's aser. Rashi says over here, aser la duka mishum schita. Now Rabbi say, is my intention to squeeze out from the cloth? No, it's not my intention. What's my intention? To close the barrel. So Rabbi say, here's a davar sheno miskavein, and yet Rav is saying that what? That it's aser. If that's the case, how can you say that Rav would be matir bia rishona on Shabbos? Because I will say one thing is clear, which is bia rishona is going to act and is going to create an opening. Right? So the Mai says the davar shena miskavein. So how could Rav say that it's mutter? To which Gemara says no. The barrel case is different. I'll tell you why. Bahi afil Reb Shimon moda. We're saying the barrel case. Even Reb Shimon would agree that halacha l'maisa. You are not allowed to put the stopper back in the barrel. Why? Listen to this. Rabbi say, here we go. Oh. Rabbi say, remember again, in the world of unintended consequences, there are two levels. There's a davar shena miskavein and there's a psik reisha. But remember again from our Shabbos days, what's psik reisha? Remember again the most popular child toys, right? Children's toys in times of the Gemara, chicken heads. Right? So I want to give my kid a chicken head. What parent doesn't want to give their kid a chicken head? Hey, so let's say, again, I want to give my kid the thing. There's only one problem. In order to get the chicken head, what do you need to do? You need to kill the chicken. That's not my intention. So I will say, psik reisha represents an act that has an inevitable outcome or consequence. See, here's the distinction. A davar sheno miskavein represents an action which may or may not cause a malacha result, versus a psik reisha, which will definitely cause a malacha. So the Gemara says like this: Rabbi Shimon holds that a davar sheno miskavein is mutter, but Rabbi Shimon holds that in a case, ultimately again, in a case of psik reisha, where what you're going to do is definitely going to result in a malacha, he holds that halacha l'maisa is going to be usher. That's why in the barrel case, he holds you can't use the stopper. Because the whole chap of the stopper is you have to push it in. So the whole chap of that is definitely going to result in schita. Even Rabbi Shimon would agree there that it's aser. Okay, so 1 second, so let's analyze this. V'hamarav Chia bar Rav Ashi amrav halacha Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi say Rav Chia bar Ashi said the name of Rav that the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, namely that a davar she'ino miskavein is aser. If that's the case, then how did we say that Rav would allow bia rishona on Shabbos? For Rav Chanan bar Ami Amar Shmuel halacha Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say here's the problem. Now we have Rav being set up as holding like Rabbi Yehuda, namely Davar She'ino Miskavein is Aser, and ultimately again Shmuel holding like Rabbi Shimon that Davar She'ino Miskavein is Mutter. For Rav Chia bar Avin Masnile below Gavri, and also Rav Chia bar Avin's version, he took away all of the other people and just had it straight out. Rav Amar Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, Ushmuel Amar Halacha Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say, see, here's the problem. Now we'll say we have it explicitly set up that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, a davar she'ino miskavein is going to be aser. Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon that a davar she'ino miskavein is going to be mutter. So I will say, just so we're clear over here. Remember, I will say, we're focused on one simple question. Bia Rishona on Shabbos mutter aser. Here's what we know. We have a version that says, that Rav says that it's mutter. In order to hold that Bia Rishona is mutter, we're assuming right now you have to subscribe to two truths. Truth number one, dam mifkat pakid. Right? Besulim blood is absorbed and detached from the body. Therefore, Bia Rishona, even if it creates bleeding, that's not a chabura. That's not an injury. And number two, you have to accept that what? Davar she'ino miskavein is mutter, because you are going to create an opening, and davar she'ino miskavein, but that's not my intention, and therefore halacha l'maaseh, that's mutter. So I will say, in order to say that Rav permits it, Rav would have to subscribe to these two ideas. The problem now is that we have explicitly Rav on record saying that by davar she'ino miskavein, the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that what? Davar she'ino miskavein is aser. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, we'll say, here we go. The Olam Rav Rabbi Yehuda Svirale. We'll say, here we go. Really, you're right. Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Oh boy. Okay. So we'll say, let's take a deep breath. We're going to get through this together. So here we go. We'll say, so listen to this. Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, which is that what? That davar she'ino miskavein is aser. Okay. Lahach lishna da'amar dam mifkat pakid mekalkel hu eitzel pesach. So I will say, even though Rav will hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that a davar she'ino miskavein is going to be aser, Rav could still allow Bia Rishona on Shabbos. How? So number one, I will say, if you hold dam mifkat pakid, like we said, the blood is absorbed and detached from the body, so therefore it's not a chabura. And I will say, what you'll have to say is that ultimately, again, the Bia Rishona, which goes ahead and removes the basulim, is an act of kilkul, is a destructive act. Okay? So therefore, I will say, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that mekalkel is mutter. So therefore, again, dam mifkat pakid, the Bia Rishona, which removes the basulim, is a quote unquote a destructive act. Remember again, how can you say that Bia Rishona is a destructive act? That's what we saw before Rashi explained, because the status of basula is quote unquote a higher status than be'ula. So therefore, the act of removing the Bia Rishona, which removes the basulim, is a quote unquote a destructive act. That's how Rav would say Bia Rishona would be mutter. Or lahach lishna damar dam chaburi michbar mekalkel bechabura. Or I will say ultimately again, according to the version that says that no, the blood is absorbed in the body, in which case again we have a chabura. Even in that case, you'd have to say that what? The act of causing that chabura ultimately again is mekalkel, is destructive. So I will say, essentially what the Gemara is saying is like this. Even if you want to set up Rav holding like Rabbi Yehuda, that a davar she'ino miskavein is going to be what? Aser. Pretty much what is Rav going to do? Rav is going to play the mekalkel card. Either way, it's mekalkel, it's a destructive act. So I will say, if you hold dam mifkat pakid, that the blood is absorbed and detached, so the act of creating an opening is mekalkel, because she was a basula, now she is a ba'ula. And if you hold dam michbar chabar, that ultimately the blood is absorbed in the body, right? And therefore, again, the Bia Rishona is a chabur, is an injury. The act of causing the injury itself is mekalkel. So he's going to play the mekalkel card, and that would allow for Bia Rishona. Okay, so we'll say, so where we're holding right now is Rav does hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that a davar she'ino miskavein is going to be mutter. Now we'll say what we don't know is how Rav holds about dam basulim. Right? Is dam basulim michbar chabar, right? Or mifkad, right? Or I should say chaburi michbar, or mifkad pakid. That we don't know, but it seems to either way he could potentially say that Bia Rishona is going to be mutter on Shabbos, because either way it's mekalkel. It's mekalkel. Okay, Good. Let's go weiter. Maser Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda raises a kasha. Tinokes shelo igias mana liros. So again, according to this version now, just so you understand, this is very important. What we have done is shown that according to Rav, Bia Rishona is mutter on Shabbos. It requires a little bit of halachic maneuvering, but we've done it. Good. Massive Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda raises the kasha to this whole thing. Here we go. Let's say the following situation. A young girl is married off. So in other words, we're talking about a girl now who has not yet reached the age of menstruation. So she has not become a nida yet. Okay, so watch this. Vinise, she gets married. So we'll say, a little bit of background over here. We're going to see that, I will say, the fact that we know that let's take a step back. A woman becomes a nida. How does one become a nida? A woman only becomes a nida through what we call dam nida, which is uterine blood. One thing is clear, which is dam besulam is what? Not uterine blood. So I just want to point out that means, for example, a woman only becomes a nida if it's uterine blood. So for example, let's say she has an injury on the vaginal canal and causes bleeding. That does not make her a nida. An interesting machlokes regarding cervical blood, but even according to most opinions, cervical blood does not make her a nida either. It's only blood that emanates from within the uterus itself. So I will say, but here's the complicated part. The complicated part is now, let's say a woman gets married, she has bleeding from dam besulim. So I will say, how long do we attribute bleeding from bia to dam besulim? Versus at what point in time do we have to be concerned that maybe the blood that she's experiencing maybe is dam nida? That's the concern. We're going to see this halacha lamaisa because for us contemporarily, we actually assume that after bia rishona, halacha today contemporarily, because after bia rishona, a woman becomes a nida. So we'll get into that halacha, even though again everyone accepts that dam besulin is not dam nida. We'll get into that sugya. So watch this. So tinokish lo yiz man aliros v'nisei. Suppose you have a girl who has not yet reached the age where she becomes a nida. So what happens? That she gets married. Beishamai omrim nosnin la arbalelos. So Beishamai says we give her 4 nights. Then I will say, what does that mean 4 nights? That we assume that within the first 4 nights after marriage, if she bleeds from bia, that's dam besulim. That's dam besulim and nothing to do with nida. So Beisila says. No, until the wound heals. In other words, I will say, we ask her if she's experiencing sensitivity. In other words, I will say, again, let's say, again, when we say the wound heals, that's a reference to the breaking of the basulim. As long as she feels sensitivity as a result of relations, we attribute that to the basulim, and therefore, no matter how long she bleeds for, as a result, we call it dam basulim. Okay, Hegia man aliros. If now, let's say she's old enough that she becomes a nida, v'nises. So I will say, so now we have a little bit of a greater concern. Beishamai says, we give her the first night. What does it mean the first night? Then we'll say, as many times as they have bia on that first night, if she bleeds, we attribute that bleeding to dam besulim, and it's not a problem. Ubeisilo omrim ad matzeh Shabbos arbalelos. And Beishamai says that Allah said, no, we give them 4 nights up until Matzeh Shabbos. Why 4 nights? We're assuming when is a basula getting married? Wednesday. So Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Matzeh Shabbos. We give them 4 nights. And any bleeding that's experienced over those 4 nights, we assume that what? Ultimately, again, is attributable to dam besulim. Okay, now watch this. We'll say, Amud Beis. Here we go. My love, di'ilo boil, matzi boil afilu b'Shabbos. Now, I will say, here's what's interesting, right? Everyone, I shouldn't say everyone. Right now, what's happening over here is, in the first case of the girl who has not yet reached the age of nidos, Beis Shammai is giving her 4 nights. In the second case, Beis Hillel is giving her 4 nights. Then I will say, whenever we speak about 4 nights, what is 4 nights? 4 nights, by definition, includes what? Shabbos. And it sounds like over here that they're permitted to consummate their marriage even on Shabbos. In other words, that even if they weren't together Wednesday night or Thursday night, that halacha l'maisa, the possibility to consummate the marriage on Friday night, Shabbos night, exists. So I will say, you see from here an explicit halacha, seems to be from here this brisa, that bia rishona is permitted on Shabbos night To which the Gemara says, my love d'ilo boil, first line vav amud beis. My love d'ilo boil, matzi boil afilu b'Shabbos. Aren't we seeing that halacha l'maisa, even if for some reason they have not consummated their marriage until now, that bia rishon will be permitted even on Shabbos? So which the Gemara says, no. Amarava lo lebar mishabbos. Now I will say, actually, as much as we are, excuse me. Sorry. So Rava says, no, lebar mishabbos. No. What it means is that halacha l'maisa, they have 4 nights after marriage, right? 4 nights, excluding Shabbos night. So in other words, what do they have? They have Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Motzei Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, 1 second. Va'amar le Abaye, v'ha ad Motzei Shabbos arba leilos katani. That's not what the Brisa says. The Brisa says we give them 4 nights. So we'll say what the Brisa essentially. Let's go with the second case because it's a little bit easier. You have a girl, a woman who has reached the age where she becomes a nida. She gets married. Now what happens? What are we saying? Halacha l'maisa. They have bia. She bleeds as a result of that bia. Beis Hillel says, for the first 4 nights after they get married, we attribute bleeding to dam besulim and not to dam nida. Okay? So I will say, what that also tells me is, any of those first 4 nights, they can consummate their marriage. Which sounds like even on Shabbos night, ultimately, again, they have the ability to consummate their marriage. So bia rishon is permitted on Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, Amarava kisha ba'al. No. What's the case? The case, I will say, ultimately, again, is where halacha l'maisa, they already had bia. So I will say, okay, this is interesting. They already had bia. Meaning what? I will say that halacha l'maisa, what it's saying is, if they already had bia on Wednesday night or Thursday night, they could also have bia Shabbos night. So I don't understand. If they already had bia on Wednesday night or Thursday night, what's the chiddush in saying that they could have bia Shabbos night as well? So I will say, listen to this. Kamash malan d'shari lemival b'Shabbos. I will say, well, actually, the chiddush is that even though the bia rishona took place on Wednesday night or Thursday night, or there was bia on both nights, they're still permitted to have bia on Shabbos night. Why is that? Kiddush the Amar Shmuel pirza dechuka mutar likanis ba b'Shabbos. I will say, it literally means a narrow entranceway one is permitted to enter into on Shabbos. I will say, this is not a metaphor. It's actually a statement. I will say, what he's referring to over here is as follows. Imagine there's an actual narrow entranceway. When you enter it, by definition, what's going to end up happening? You're going to end up moving some dirt, right? Moving some dirt, and thereby extending the entranceway. Sa'ai, isn't that bona? Isn't that an act of building? You're extending. To which Rava says no. Sorry, Shmuel says no. Pirtza dechuka, ultimately, again, you'd be permitted to go ahead and enter in. So I will say, look at Rashi, Shemasher Tzroros, even though you're moving pebbles. So obviously, the metaphor is that I will say it could very well be that when a couple initially has bia, sometimes it happens that the besulim are not fully ruptured during the first act of relations. So it's possible that it could happen that for the first couple of times, each time the besulim is still there, and the besulim is being ruptured a bit more with each subsequent act of bia. So you might have thought that halacha l'maisa, therefore bia should not be permitted on Shabbos, even if it's not the first bia, even if it's the second bia or the third bia, because you may be by definition, we'll call it widening the opening, rupturing more of the bia. Kamash malan, that it's mutar. The afa pisha mashir tzroros, even though again, ultimately, literally, in the actual case, you're moving dirt or you're moving pebbles. In the marital case, you're rupturing the besulim a bit more. Okay, so I will say, so the Gemara, so just based on what's happening over here, the Gemara is suggesting that halacha l'maisa, it's possible that when we say that bia could occur on Shabbos for the chassan and kala, we're actually not referring to bia rishona. Maybe we're referring to bia shnia or bia shlishis, the second bia, the third bia. You'll say, if that's the case, then what's the chiddush? What's the chiddush? So I will say, what's the chiddush? The chiddush is that even though the bia rishona or the bia shnia may not have fully removed the besulim, and an act of bia on Shabbos may be rupturing the besulim a bit more, it's mutar. It's mutar. But you can't necessarily bring a raya from here that's what? That bia rishona on Shabbos is mutar. So Master of Yosef, so let's analyze a bit more. Chasen patim mikriyas shema laila rishon and matzei Shabbos lo asa ma'isa. Let's listen to this. Interesting halacha. A chasen, right, a groom, is pater from kriyas shema on his wedding night and through matzei Shabbos if he has not yet consummated his marriage. So we'll say, so what's the logic over here? My lav ditarid debay lemival. So we'll say, so now what's the logic? The logic is that he's preoccupied with the mitzvah of Bia Rishona, right? And halacha l'maisa, therefore, osik b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. He's engaged in one mitzvah, therefore, halacha l'maisa, he's exempted, right? So he's preoccupied with the mitzvah of the Bia Rishona, therefore he's pater from Shema. The Rabbi said, this is very interesting. My love the Torah by the mival. The Rabbi said, now what did the Brisa just say? A chasen is pater from Kriyas Shema. And how long is he pater from Kriyas Shema until? From Wednesday night through when? Matzei Shabbos, assuming that he has not yet consummated the marriage. Shabbos, according to this, it sounds like when is he permitted to engage in Bia Rishona? Shabbos. So you see from here, the fact that the chasen is pater from Kriyas Shema on Friday night indicates to us that Bia Rishona is permitted even on Friday night. No. Amrli Abaye, lo ditarid de lo boil. What's the case? Ultimately, again, Abaye says, what's the case? He's tarid, ultimately, again, that he did not go ahead and have beer. In other words, this is very interesting. Abaye says, no, Wednesday night, he's pater from Kriyas Shema because he's preoccupied with the fact that he may have the beer. Thursday night, preoccupied with the fact that he may have the bia. Matzei Shabbos, preoccupied with the fact that he may have the bia. Shabbos night, why is he preoccupied? Why is he tarid? Because he didn't consummate the marriage. And on that night, he can't consummate the marriage. Simar says, I don't understand. Amalei Rava, Uisham tircha pater, so I don't understand. Tir the pater, so I don't understand. I understand, so I said, let's go back. I understand preoccupation with a mitzvah as being grounds for being exempted from another mitzvah. So I understand the Patur on Wednesday night, if he didn't have Bia, the Patur on Thursday night, and Patur on Matzei Shabbos. But now you're going to tell me that on Shabbos night, he's exempted from Kriyas Shema because he's preoccupied that he can't perform the mitzvah? That's the exemption. The Gemara calls this tirda. Tirda just means general preoccupation. Not preoccupation with what? With performing the mitzvah, but just general preoccupation. My mind is preoccupied. In this case over here on Friday night, what is my mind preoccupied with? That I can't do the bia. That's a reason to be exempted. Elame'ata, if that's the case, tavas svina sobayam hachinavi depater. I'll say the truth is, if I'm in business, and my boat capsized, right, my cargo boat capsized over sea, all right, or ran aground, I should also be pater from Kriyas Shema, right? Because what? I'm preoccupied, right? I will say if preoccupation is a reason not to daven, then guess what? We're all going to have a lot more free time on our hands, right? So what does that mean? In other words, I will say the concept of osik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah is the concept when I'm preoccupied with the performance of a mitzvah. But just general preoccupation as being grounds for mitzvah exemption, that doesn't make any sense. Maybe you'll say, no, maybe preoccupation, about saying in general, is grounds for going ahead and being exempted from a mitzvah. I'll tell you why that doesn't work, says the Gemara. I'll tell you why. Rabbi saying, Avel is chayv in all mitzvahs. Now, if you think about it, right? Ein preoccupation gedola mizo, right? There's no one who's more preoccupied with an avel. No one who's more preoccupied than an avel. What is an avel preoccupied with? What is he preoccupied with? His loss, right? His avelos. Yet, Rabbi said the only thing an avel is exempt from is what? Tefillin on the first day. And by the way, Rabbi say that's based on a pasuk from Yecheskel. Right, that's just based on the fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu, when Yecheskel loses his wife, Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Yecheskel, keep your tefillin on. Keep your tefillin on. From there, the Gemara Maseches Moed says, you learn from here that what? That in general, an avel on the first day doesn't wear tefillin. But an avel is chayiv in all other mitzvahs. I don't mean an onen. Onen is something different. But an avel is chayiv in all mitzvahs. So we'll say, what do you see from an avel being chayiv in mitzvahs? Even if you're an avel, say, is there a mitzvah for an avel to be preoccupied with his loss? Is there a mitzvah? No. There's no mitzvah, but there is a de facto reality that an avel is going to be preoccupied with his loss. So what do you see from here? Well, even though someone is preoccupied, preoccupation is not the patur from mitzvahs. If that's the case, if you're telling me that a chassan can't perform Bia Rishona on Shabbos night, and what? The reason he's going to be patur from Kriyat Shema is because he's preoccupied with something he can't do. That doesn't make any sense. Ela Amar Rava says Tanoihi. So I'll say, here we go. Rava says, in reality, this whole thing is a machlokes Tanai. I will say, the ability to perform Bia Rishona on Shabbos is a machlokes Tanoim. Here we go. Chada imlo asamai seberishin pater af b'sheni. B'sheni pater af b'shlishi. So I will say, I have one brisa that says that if a chassan didn't consummate the marriage on Wednesday night, so ultimately, again, he's going to be pater from Shema, even on Thursday night if he didn't get consummate. And if he didn't consummate on Thursday night, he's going to be pater on what? On Friday night. And I will say, what does that brisa show you? That Bia Rishona is mutter on Shabbos. Right? Because the patur, ultimately, again, for Kriyat Shema is because he has the ability to be osik in the mitzvah of Bia Rishona even on Shabbos night. V'tanya idach, another brisa says, Rishon v'sheni pater. I will say, if he didn't consummate the marriage on Wednesday night, he's pater from Shema. If he didn't yet consummate on Thursday night, he's going to be pater from Shema, shlishi chayiv. Oh. Both say, but on shlishi Shabbos night, he's going to be chayiv in Shema. Both say, what do you see from this brisa? That ultimately Bia Rishona is asur on Shabbos, and therefore again there's no patur for Kriyat Shema for the chassan. So I will say, so now what we've just done, I will say, is Rava's come along and said, the truth is this discussion is a machlokes tanoim. Incredible. So I will say, now watch this. Abaye will say, no. Hasam nami betir da pligi, v'hani tanoi ki hani tanoi. I will say, in reality, this machlokes is actually a machlokes about tirda as well, about preoccupation. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Amar lecha Abaye, Amar lecha, hanach tonai nami betirda pligi, v'hai de pater le mikriyat shema la mishum deshari lemival, ela kasavra hamitztair tsar shal mitzvah, pater mikriyat shema. So I will say, Abaye says, actually, not necessarily. It could be that both brises agree that Bia Rishona is going to be Asr on Shabbos. How do you understand then the machlokes regarding whether or not there's a patur on Shabbos? I will say that just might be a patur, that might just be a machlokes, ultimately again in tirda. In other words, I will say what level of preoccupation is ultimately again grounds to allow for exemption of a mitzvah. That's really what this machlokes is over here. Back to Rashi. The brisa that paters you from Kriyat Shema on Shabbos is not because Bia Rishona is mutter on Shabbos. Rather, what? Ela kasavar hamitztair tsar shal mitzvah pater b'Kriyat Shema. So Shabbos say this is incredible. According to Abaye, it could very well be that according to both brises, Bia Rishona on Shabbos is still going to be asr. So if Bia Rishona is asr, then why would you be exempt from Kriyat Shema on Shabbos night? Because I will say, according to one opinion, that's still called tirda de mitzvah. Right? Even though you can't do the Bia Rishona, thinking about the Bia Rishona, knowing you have to do the Bia Rishona, ultimately, again, it's still called preoccupation with a mitzvah, and therefore a patur. That's the machlokes. V'hani tanoi ki hani tanoi. I will say, and these tanoi will be like this. Now, how so? This time, here we go. Hakonis is a basula l'yivol b'tchila b'Shabbos. If a person marries a basula, the Bia Rishona should not occur on Shabbos. The Chachamim matirin. Wow, here I will say, here we go. The Chachamim say it's mutter. It's mutter. Then I will say man Chachamim. Who are the Chachamim? So Amar Rava Rabbi Shimon here. I will say the Chachamim Rabbi Shimon. The Amar davar shein miskavin mutter. So I will say it's Rabbi Shimon who holds that a davar shein miskavin is mutter. So I will say here it is. It's a machlokes. And I will say, by the way, if according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not just enough to say that davar shein miskavin is mutter. It would also be helpful to say what? Dam mifkat pakid, that the blood ultimately, again, is collected and absorbed outside of the body. So if you take that piece, couple that with what? That davar shein miskavin is mutter, then Bia Rishona should be permitted on Shabbos. So I will say one more piece. Amar le Abaye, Abaye says, but 1 second. V'hamodi Rabbi Shimon b'psik reisha v'lo yamos. I will say, here's the problem. Bia Rishona is not just simply a davar shein miskavin. isn't Bia Rishona by definition a psik reisha? In other words, I will say, it's like the bottle stopper case. You're going to definitely cause bleeding. And even Rabbi Shimon holds that whereas a davar she'eino miskaven may be mutter, but l'maisa, even Rabbi Shimon agrees that a psik reisha is going to be what? Is going to be aser. So what's going on? Rabbi say this is fascinating. Amar lei. So he responded to him. So the Gemara, I'm sorry. So he responded to him. Listen to this. Amar lei lo kahalalu bavliim. Right. So us Jews in Eretz Yisrael are not like the Jews in Bavel. She'ein bikiyin b'hatiyah. The Jews in Bavel are not skilled at hatiyah. They will say hatiyah literally means angling one's self. El yesh bikiyin b'hatiyah. So essentially this is fascinating. The Gemara says that causing bleeding by the Bia Rishona is not a psik reisha. Not a psik reisha. Why? Because there's the concept ultimately again of hatiyah. Rashi says, shematin litzdadin. Ultimately again a person angles themselves to the side, ve'ein motzidam, and doesn't cause bleeding. And I will say, what does this mean? So I will say, I think that there's actually a very simple medical pshat with this. See, the hymen, the basulim, are allowed, sometimes, again, there's no like one din in the basulim, every person is different, but sometimes there is a level of elasticity with the basulim, which means that technically speaking, you could have Bia Rishona and the basulim could still be intact. It's absolutely unequivocally possible. So I will say that's what it sounds like the Gemara is describing over here. That apparently, again, there are people who are more skilled in being careful with the Bia Rishona, that halacha l'maaseh, utilizing the elasticity of the basulim. Come on, so we have to be mature in these things over here. Come on, keep it together. Right? So again, maintaining elasticity in the basulim, ultimately again, so as not to cause bleeding. So I will say an incredible Gemara. We'll say all the Gemara needs to show is what? The only thing the Gemara needs to demonstrate is what? That it's not a psik reisha. And all you need to do in order to show that it's not a psik reisha is to show that Bia Rishona is possible without creating dam. That's all. Says the Gemara. I'm sorry. Imkain Torah lamadli. Shabbos say ultimately again, if that's the case, fine. So if that's the case, that there's the ability to go ahead and halacha l'maisa, do the Bia Rishona without causing bleeding, then ultimately again, why is there tirda? Then why is there any preoccupation and therefore a patrol from Shema? To which the Gemara says, l'she'eno baki. Because Shabbos say not everybody is skilled in hatiyah. So I don't understand, says Gemara. Yomru baki motor she'eno baki aser. So let's get this. Let me get this right, Rabbi say. Right? Somebody comes and asks the shaila, is Bia Rishona, right? Is Bia Rishona permitted on Shabbos? So what do they say? Well, are you skilled in the hatiyah method? Right? Is that what we're literally asking over here? Like, how skilled are you in hatiyah? Right? So we'll say, so in other words, halacha doesn't operate this way. Right? If you know how to do hatiyah, Bia Rishona is mutter. You know how to do hatiyah, Bia Rishona is us. Is that how? To which the Gemara says, to which the Gemara answers, Rov bikiyin hein. We'll say the majority of people know how to do hatiyah. Okay, or at least once upon a time. Right? At least once upon a time. I know. Right, so I'll say, so therefore again, Rov Biki and Eitzel Hatiyah Hein, and therefore I will say, what we've done is because most people, at least again, from the Gemara's perspective, most people know how to do Hatiyah, therefore what I will say, that's enough to say that Bia Rishona is not a psik reisha. And if Bia Rishona is not a psik reisha, then Rabbi Shimon, who holds that it's a davar she'eino miskaven, ultimately again will hold that Bia Rishona is mutter. So we'll say, we have to stop over here for today. We're not finished. I'm actually kind of leaving you a little bit in the middle. I'm leaving you in the middle of Hatiyah. We'll come back to it tomorrow, but we'll say, but again, suffice it to say that where we leave off is we have a fundamental machlokes, whether or not the Bia Rishona is going to be mutter on Shabbos. We're focusing now on the matir, which seems to be Rabbi Shimon. It's a davar she'eino miskaven. Tam mifkat pocket. What about psik reisha? It's not psik reisha, ultimately because of hatiyah. To be continued tomorrow. We'll say shkoyach.